The military legacy had no right, to be interfering with the political processes.
At no point did the military usurp power. When it comes to matters of protecting our revolution, the military will not hesitate to step in.
On 6 September, President Robert Mugabe, who was ousted from power in a military coup, breathed his last. News filtered in from Singapore that the only president that Zimbabwe had known for close to 40 years had died. Zimbabwe is at the crossroads in its political and economic front. Some say that this is the legacy that President Robert Mugabe left for Zimbabwe. Some think of him as a man who brought stability to the economy, whose eloquence wooed most of his friends and foes alike. A man who brought independence to this country, stood up against the West, against white colonial rule, challenged them even without any meaningful arsenal in his pocket. During his days, Mugabe commanded even prices to fall without any economic rationale. It is on this basis that this week's Free Talk, in proud partnership with the Frederick Newman Foundation, we will be discussing Mugabe's legacy, the Zimbabwean current polity, economic and social discourse, how his legacy impacts on our lives. And to join me to discuss this important topic and to put the political space of Zimbabwe in the right place is none other than academic and political analyst, Dr. Ibotson Mandaza. Now, Dr. Ibo has worked with ZANU-PF in his previous life. He's an academic and publisher of a number of books that have interrogated the democracy and political situation in Zimbabwe. We will discuss with him Mugabe's legacy and Zimbabwe today? So, Doc, it's 2 years now after President Robert Mugabe passed on, but 3 years after he left power. Looking back, what is his legacy about?
It's a mixed bag. I don't know if you, after this, you can read my obituary, which I wrote on the 6th of September in Africa Report. I think he's an enigma. It's a mixed feelings. On the one hand, he was a liberation icon in the mold of the founding fathers of African independence, and one has to acknowledge that. Indeed, there's no one can forget that historically. But on the other hand, his long-drawn, protracted rule has left a trail of tribulations, and it's difficult not to attribute much of the things that we have today, even though they have gotten worse under the new regime, the not so new regime. All the same, the foundations of one, the erosion of a democratic dispensation, such as we enjoyed in the 80s, except for the Gugraundi episode. Two, the legacy of stolen elections since 1996, but most clearly since 2000, all associated with his refusal to put in place a succession plan, and then and that also led to him becoming more and more dependent upon the military, ipso facto. And one would say the military, in retrospect, the military stranglehold began in 2000 elections, and also on the back of the hazardous and disorganized land reform program, which could have been done differently if we had begun doing this in the 80s. You know, even under the willing buyer, willing seller thing, one could have accelerated that. But it's clear that the land reform coming as it did in 2000 was less to do with a land reform policy, right? A well thought out policy, than a desperate bid to retain power in the face of the MDC threat. And so this in particular, his refusal to go, his refusal or failure to put in place a succession plan for within his own party has proved fatal for democracy in the time being. And indeed, while you can criticize the coup and so on and so forth, in many respects he brought upon himself, and with it the tragedy for Zimbabwe.
But some say that, you know, he was a prisoner in this whole thing, that it was people around him who wanted him to stay in power and not really about his own doing. Would you believe that?
Yes and no. Yes, in retrospect, it's clear that we know him. Historically, Mugabe was always a hostage to the military, right through from Mozambique. You know, he was also hostage to the military, but he had a chance to free himself of the military in the 80s, and he appeared to succeed. The mistake he made, in my view, was to bring back the military into the center of power politics, mainly through his bid to stay in power, you know. And when in 2002, Zimbabwe and others state that they will not give away to non-liberators, you know, that should have been a warning to him. that really is now in the mouth of the beast, so to speak. And so yes, he was always historically hostage to the military and the securocrats. And two, yes, if you can look at the attempted coup in 2007, now we'll see from Emerson Mnangagwa's book, of the attempted coup in 2007. It was virtually a coup in 2008, after he lost the election. And subsequently, you can see how Emerson Mnangagwa and Chiwenga were preparing for what happened eventually in November 2017. So yes, these guys were cunning, but he became too vain. He lost his guard. A man who knew very clearly the dangers of the people that surrounded him. He ended up trusting them. And you remember how wounded he felt betrayed by Emerson and Chiwenga. But he had so much faith in these guys, whom he knew to be dangerous, and whom he, by his own admission, were people who would not be allowed to power because they're both incompetent and dangerous. But there they were, They surrounded him.
But let us look at the transition into the Second Republic. Is there a real transition there?
Yeah, well, there's no transition. There's no transition. It's very interesting that the slogan for the slogan for the Restore Legacy was a slogan. When last you hear these people talk about Restore Legacy? It's forgotten. It was a pretext, really. It was more about naked power, hunger, and more important, it's linked to looting, basically.
Is there evidence of looting you talk about is linked to looting?
Well, basically, the way of looting is a frenzy. And there was clearly competition for resources, looting between the factions within ZANU-PF. Mugabe himself was also looting, so was the Mnangagwas. And in the end, one of the triggers, I'm told, for the coup was Mugabe closing down Anjin. Remember in 2016? Do you remember that?
Yes.
Yeah, Mugabe received a report showing that Anjin were at the heart of the diamond smuggling, diamond looting. But Anjin was involved with the military. And the military guys, including Emerson Mnangagwa and Chiwenga, were very, very aggrieved by that action. So people like SB Moyo and even right in the president's office, people were, and significantly, after Mugabe went, Anjin is back. Just one example. The cartel that has now developed around Mnangagwa and Tagwire is now legion already. The fuel sector, the financial sector, the mining sector, the banking sector, some even say the media sector. So here we are.
But as we look at it, to present day Zimbabwe, do we have hope as a nation that we will have a point where we have political leaders who are not after lining their own pockets?
It's very difficult. Unless certain things are done to break with the past, which is one, restoration of the constitutionalism. Yeah, and I think even the opposition, the Shamisas, they must go back to the 2013 constitution, have faith in it, and seek to implement it, not to refer to it expediently. Because even if the constitution is not perfect, it is a fair guideline towards nation building and towards the responsibilities of citizens, the responsibilities of the rulers, and more important, it it provides for the healthy separation of powers between an accountable executive, a vibrant legislature, and a fiercely independent judiciary. These are the pillars of democracy. Now we don't have that, clearly.
But how do we get there when you say clearly that?
Go back to the constitution.
How do we go back to the constitution with the army in the fold, as you say?
And there's no way we can get away from it until that is done. Restoration of constitutionalism, the rule of law, and the return of the military to the barracks. That is must start. Nothing less than that. That's the minimum, in my view.
And do you see that happening?
Yeah, it's going to happen. There's no way that Zimbabwe can continue this way. Impossible.
But the Second Republic or the new dispensation has said that it's making victories.
There's no Second Republic. That's a myth, first of all, because basically Emerson came in with a coup. He's imposed by the military. You know? And one would even argue he finished Mugabe's term. And people are arguing now that, in fact, if he stands in 2023, he's actually going for the third term, which is the issue that brought Lungu down in Zambia. Lungu finished Sata's term, remember? Okay? And then his own term. You are the one to go for the third term now.
But the constitution recognizes that if you finish someone else's term, it's not your term, is it?
It's your term. Which constitution says that? Which constitution says that? No constitution ever anticipates someone having to finish somebody's term. But it's a term. It talks about terms only. So I think it's a far-fetched to talk about second republic. Do you feel that you're in a new dispensation? Do you?
But let us talk about the aspects of them saying that they are bringing in new investment, opening new frontiers, the roads, they are maintaining the roads, they are building the airport, and billions and billions of mega deals coming through to Zimbabwe. And is that not a movement towards a better?
Where are those deals? Where are they? Quantify them, show us. Show us the impact of those deals on the economy. In fact, on the back of claims that the economy is stabilized, it's not. I mean, you know the foreign currency crisis, right? It's 160 to 1 now, almost 2 to 1 to the official rate. So where is the improvement? What are the indicators of progress in our country like Zimbabwe? One is tackling unemployment. Unemployment is growing. The economy is completely informalized. No, you tell me, where are the facts that the economy has improved? I want to believe it, but where are they?
They've got backing from IMF, and the IMF says that the economy is going to grow in Zimbabwe.
Well, they said on the basis of the harvest this year. We had a special session on that subject, right? And if you read the two documents, the World Bank report and the IMF report, they're contradictory, completely contradictory. They highlight the crisis, right? And they're talking about growth for 1 year on the basis of one agricultural season. Well, already we know that it has not been a good season at all. It hasn't. In fact, the grain harvest is not as good as expected. It's too soon to talk, but I'm just saying that basically it was a very scanty report. We know why the reports were issued the way they were. It's because these people are in business, IMF and World Bank. They want to get back to re-engagement with Zimbabwe. They're looking for any way possible to get back. They've not been lending to Zimbabwe since the 90s. That's what they want. To get to business. But if you talk to them behind the scenes, they talk of a very, very broken economy.
Why would someone want to lend to a broken economy?
Well, they want to lend, but they want to lend on conditionalities. And one of them, one was reform. Reform the economy, which this guy is not prepared to do. Because to do so, that it would undermine the extent to which people are making money out of a very bad economic situation. People are making money. You know, there is even a rumor that the Mnangagwa regime was very concerned at the prospects of the sanctions being lifted, because that would have brought a more spotlight on them, you see, once sanctions are lifted. So it's an economy that's given to illicit financial flows, outflows. And I mean, you can't run an economy which is based or complete on extraction of raw materials, which go out as raw materials. There's no manufacturing, there's no industrialization. You can't go anywhere with that. So that's why the mining sector appears to be the one booming, is because it's at the expense of the country, largely. And where is the money going to? It's coming from mining. We would, economists estimate that we should be making something like 12 billion a year from mining alone. 6 billion alone from gold. But right now, 1.5. It has fallen from 3.5 billion 2 years ago to 1.5 billion. The money, so it's leaking. You know, 60% of the gold production is leaving the country illicitly. That's a lot.
But what should be done apart from going back to the constitution? What should be done to ensure that we begin to benefit from this 12 billion that you're talking about, that economists have put in as a figure there?
You need, first of all, constitutionalism, rule of law, and the military back to the barracks. That's the first. An orderly government, first and foremost. That's the first. Then you can have an accountable government. You have seen Chiri's reports in and year out for the last. Where have they been? Has the reports been debated in Parliament? Is no one doing anything about it? Has no one been arrested for it? Nothing. You have scandal after scandal, but there is no accountability. Instead, you have impunity. Now, all that cannot take place in a constitutionally based government, because it will call for accountability. It will call for a very vibrant legislature to raise questions. Yeah? You know, a situation where now half the parliament has been taken out. So where's the debate? So I'm just making the point that constitutionalism is very vital. It is the beginning, you know. And if we had the economy were to improve, the looting would continue because there's no accountability. Right now, you've seen the cartel reports on Zimbabwe. They're frightening.
You speak about parliament debates and oversight. There's an opposition in parliament led by Douglas Monzora.
Yes, what about them?
Do you think it's not doing its work of oversight?
When last year you have any debates in parliament? You tell me. You've heard of any debates in parliament the last 2 years? There's nothing. Pollard and Monzora, I mean, that's a fuss. It's an embarrassing situation, really. Very embarrassing. You can't call Monzora as group opposition.
He believes in engaging instead of confronting.
That's stupid. Sorry to say. It's foolish, you know. It's disgraceful in my view. I have no words for it, you know.
But you have an inside understanding of ZANU-PF. I mean, having the history of having been there with ZANU-PF during the liberation struggle. Do you think that it is capable of reforming itself?
Impossible. It's too late. The coup was a stage in the disintegration of the Party of Liberation, which had already gone through major divisions before. You remember the ousting of Marange and 55% of the party in 2014. Then you have the coup, which again led to the departure of half the party again, of what had remained from the 2014. Many of whom are in exile, the so-called G40. And right now you can see that the divisions within the party around the provinces is legion. Not to mention the fact that Emmerson has little or no social base in any of the provinces. Even within the Midlands itself, there are question marks about his social base. So I would say that the party, if it can be revived, I'll be surprised.
Don't you think the young people in ZANU-PF are capable of reforming the party if it needs to be reformed?
Well, there you are. What happened in the Youth League? The Youth League has just disappeared. Women's League, where is it? Don't you see all these things have just disappeared? You are a journalist. Don't you see that this is not the same party anymore? Divided. And you have a situation where opportunism now rules the day. People joining from Norway and rejoining the People's Party. Come on. It's what I know deep inside the ZANU-PF is fatally broken.
So what is keeping it together and surviving?
The state power. State power. Without state power, it'd be gone.
Can you explain when you say state power is the one?
Yeah, because basically those in power, the leadership of the party, are also the leadership of the state. That saves them, both institutionally, also financially. If it were not if they were not in the state, there would be no party. Clearly. Because over the time, the party has become conflated with the state. You see? And indeed, if they lose elections and they lose state power, that's the end of the party. As happened in UNIP in Zambia, as happened in Malawi Congress Party under Banda, the same thing would happen here.
But do you even think it would be possible for ZANU-PF to wake up one day out of power?
Oh yes. Oh yes. It would have been out of power long ago. 2008, definitely, they've been out. With a different chapter altogether. Yes, it is possible to revive ZANU-PF on the principles of the liberation struggle and so on and so forth, but who are the people to do it? The younger generation don't understand that, nor do they have any affiliation to the kind of thinking. And those of my age are old and finished. So I think that the death of ZANU-PF is a reality. Emerson and his group are just bearing it now.
So in your view, you think Mugabe died with ZANU-PF?
He had killed it. He had killed ZANU-PF when he died. And Emerson is now bearing it. And one significant thing about Emerson, he doesn't seem to be interested in politics.
For why do you say that? He's the president of the country.
Yeah, but he's not political. Do you feel Emerson is political? He's not.
What is he instead?
He's just a security hack, basically. More concerned about his personal safety now than anything else. I don't think he has any regard for the party, to be honest. Nor does he understand it, except as an instrument of control. But in terms of party, that we know as political animals what a party should do, be based in the people, reflect the will of the people, expression through branches, through districts, through provinces. That's what a party is about, historically. Do you see anything of that? I don't. Admittedly, even the opposition, that's also lacking. So we have a poverty of political parties, politically and ideologically. We're in a crisis. And we've been in this for a long time. Huh?
But ZANU-PF continues to say that it's building its party from structure level, from the cell, actually.
Where is the evidence of it? What you see, the reality is when towards the elections, whether it's party elections, provincial elections, when you see a lot of activity, people want to get into posts. Because office holding has a lot to do with access to resources. So what you have here, we're in this country, we have political election platforms in the form of political parties. You see them only when there are elections. Because getting into parliament is a livelihood. It means a salary, a car. Yeah, you can be a gardener today, but if you get into the council, you're a councillor, you've got some resources. The state has become a avenue for livelihoods. And that's not the same as political parties.
So where are those that have the interest of running this country to be a better place? Where's the business people, those who have succeeded and willing to turn around this economy and this country?
They are there, but I mean, are they? First of all, we have 75% of all professional skilled Zimbabwe outside the country. That's a big number. 75%. How many countries can survive that way? That is an effect on the capacity of the economy, effect on the capacity of government, state sector. It has effect on just the life of civic society. It has an impact on the nature and capacity of opposition parties. All this is a major factor, and that's why I'm saying that we cannot think of restoring constitutionalism and rule of law and economic recovery without involving that 75% outside. And the political party or organization which takes that into account will rule the day.
We've been talking about the military. Now let's turn to the judiciary. Do you think that the judiciary in Zimbabwe is still the bulwark of democracy?
No, it isn't. It isn't. No longer. It's a pale shadow of what it could be. And if you compare with our neighboring countries, South Africa, Malawi, Zambia, we should be ashamed of our judiciary. The quibble over the Chief Justice, good example, What does it leave him in terms of reputation and stature? He's finished.
I just wanted to find out from you, what is the state of the opposition in changing this country?
At the moment, it's very poor. The opposition in this country is very great. It's very big. I would say 90 to 95% of the population is opposed to ZANU-PF. But there's no organizational unit. The MDC, yes, they've been pruned by the state in the form of what you're seeing now, the Onzara faction, this and that. But I think the leadership of MDC Alliance itself, in Shamisa himself, leaves a lot to be. He has to do much more to get where he thinks it should be. No, I'm not happy at all myself. And I think in saying so, also all of us who are in civic society, we are critical of government, we just lack the organizational capacity and the nuances with which, the man in Zambia, HH, has shown now what can be done. We are nowhere near that.
So you're saying Zambia can't happen in Zimbabwe?
It can happen. All it requires is just some organization, because the opposition or the disaffection, the disgruntlement, the problems are so many, so evident, as in Zambia, so too here. What's lacking is just organization of the opposition.
Yeah. So my question is, what can be done then to have that organizational skill if it's really needed?
It has to be. All of us have to get down, and we are doing that, to see whether we can form a broader alliance of Democrats at home and in the diaspora, and primarily, not so much for elections, but to get to what some of us have been pushing, a transitional authority. Transitional authority based on the fact that the government of the day is failing. Two, that the opposition movement itself has no capacity to turn this, if they got into power tomorrow, to turn this around. They don't. So why don't you get a transitional government during which the reform agenda is pushed politically and economically, while the political parties are organizing themselves for the next elections. That's what we've been pushing for.
You have been attacked for this national transition.
Yes, but you can see that looks the only likely outcome. Elections won't solve anything. Do you have another disputed election? No doubt about that. Under these conditions, less than 2 years away, and can you have elections under military rule? How can you? It's a farcical to think you can have democratic elections under military rule. You can't. That's why I go back to the point I made earlier. Constitutionalism, rule of law, and the military back to the barracks. That's the first point. And this transitional authority is based on that principle.
But just in conclusion, what would you be your words to the generality of Zimbabweans? Who want to see their country get to the level that you're talking about?
Let's push for a transitional authority under which constitutionalism, the rule of law, and the return of the military to the barracks will be established as a first point, right? And get the country united around a transitional authority made up of Zimbabweans, non-partisan Zimbabweans, right? Young Zimbabweans. It must not include people from the political parties, office holders in political parties. It must not include those of us like Mandaza who is pushing for it. It must not be in that transition. It must completely an independent thing about whom everyone has agreed that Blessed, John are the best people to run this country for 2 years, to put the country back on its heels.
But if you could sit down with President Emmerson Mnangagwa, what would you tell him?
Exactly that. I would tell him exactly that. Please, sir, can you allow for transitional authority in place? Stand back. Let's help. Let's all of us put our heads together and get the best team. 18 Zimbabweans, men and women, who can push us ahead.
And any lessons for Zimbabwe learned from Mugabe that we should not repeat?
Don't do what Mugabe was doing. To stick to power, regardless, at the expense of the country. And I'm afraid Emerson is doing exactly that.
But he's limited by a constitution 2 terms.
What 2 terms?
In 2023, if he wins, he won't come back, could he?
Where? People are saying this is 3rd term of 2023. He should be the first. He should be the first to acknowledge that he was put there by the military, and that therefore his re-election in 2018 could not be legitimate, if also because it was a military-sponsored election. And then if I were Emerson, I would say, look, I think I've tried my best. Let on the legacy, let me help in forming this transitional authority.
Do our leaders care about the legacy?
I don't know. I don't know. All I can say is it appears to me at my age the only way to stay sane is not to get into power. Because it looks to me that power changes people. Change Mugabe. It's never a question of these guys have the capacity to change the state. The state changes them, makes them demons that they are once they are there in power.
Thank you very much for joining us here on the Free Talk in proud partnership with the Frederick Newman Foundation. Now, we had Dr. Ibotson Mandaza on this platform where we were discussing Zimbabwe's past with President Robert Gabriel Mugabe's legacy, Zimbabwe's present with President Emmerson Dambudzo Mnangagwa, and Zimbabwe's future. We also went to the street to hear from the people of Zimbabwe what they think about President Robert Mugabe's legacy and if President Emmerson Dambudzo Mnangagwa is living up to that legacy, bettering it or worsening it. And this is what they had to say. These are the people's voices.
If we look at the current situation, you see that everything's just turned down. You see, even the price, my price, things are zvinongokwira, zvinongoramba zvichikwira. Ukada kuti soti even ma street chaimo tikada kupinda vapana vakurwa guka, vakurwa misombo, vakubhema mabhaubhu, zvinhu izvozvo zvoti during Mugabe's time hazvaiitika. Murubona even ana dressing chaiva nasikana chaivo unyatsoona kuti even boys rana zvara kudressa unyatsoona kuti there's now a different. So President Mugabe vaiti kana vachidzika paairport wainzwa vachidzikisa maprize variwo, unlike the current president anotoisa maprize kana airfuel. Hatisi kuvasora zvedu President Mnangagwa aiwa, but you are just differentiate the difference.
Pana Mugabe ka. Mugabe pangu aripo. Tanga singambotambure zvatakuita mazuva ano izvi. Tambura kwandikureva maprice ezvinhu. Mugabe pangu aripo. Zvinhu zvese zvanga zvakanaka. Zvanga singadhure, zvinhu zvaitengeka. Plus maretsi. Yanga ingori 1:1. US nemabhondi acho. Manje zvinozve zvakunetsa. Asina kumboita zvazvanga zvakaita pana Mugabe.
Vanga vasingafaniri kuti kuvabvisa nemuitiro wavakaita. That's why muchiona David akamirira kuti so afire kuhondo, then iye ubva azogadzwa pachigaro. That's why muchiona kuti Zimbabwe we are in the current situation because vakaita zvinhu zvisiri in the biblical. Right. Zvikonzero zvakabvisirwa Mugabe pachigaro hazvina kumbogadzirisika. Why? Because they were munhu umwe chete, Mugabe naMnangagwa munhu umwe chete. Saka hapana chakagadziriswa. Because they are there just to feed their own tummy. While least forgetting us vana veZimbabwe kuti toda kuguta.
Ma street lights achabaki akusina kwabaka ma street lights every ghetto, ma roads you can see for yourself.
We are not living on a favorable atmosphere. As we have my graduates akagara muZimba.
Sezvo like Mugabe paakabviswa, we don't wanna lie. So taifunga kuti pakubviswa kwaMugabe things zvichaita zvichatiwa taonani. But we discovered kuti pakatobviswa Mugabe things are now getting worse. Ndochokwadi. So inini I don't wanna like since Mugabe abviswa things are getting worse. Tikada kutarisa Mugabe achiripo tichitasa muzvikoro ma scholarships aivepo, and then ma volunteers aitomiro kuti vanhu vekuma vasina like in terms like vabereki vanotambura vaingozongojoinidza vachiita inonzi there's this program yaitwa muzvikoro inonzi beam, yeah, akaisa beam. So you think kuti madays aMugabe ka nepakazobviswa Mugabe things are getting worse. I don't wanna like honest with you, zvinhu zvaro zviri kutotiomera like nini hangu ndisingade kuti way back it was on 2012 pakaumeuya kweSwezi. He donated a lot of things and I still remember pakauya tiri kweSwezi. And then to be honest with you achitotaurawo ma-encourages nezvinhu zvangosiyana. Good thing kuti maybe achitotudza like well, education it's a key to hold and that time can't do better. Things were good, but right now government etanayo things are getting worse. Scholarship, it's once a while. Scholarship we are this time some wangari ku like vanhu vangari kuma days scholarship ya Mugabe pakatozopinda new government vakabva vabviswa vanhu. To be honest with you, some chitosangana nodoti so I was in UK with the scholarship, but takangobviswa zvinonzwisika sado. Sometimes unongona kuti things are getting worse. Ndochokwadi.
Pana Mugabe zvinhu zvezvona zvakangonaka zvese zvematransport zvataisatombozviziva kuti transport inonetsa, taisatombozviziva totanga kuzvionawo zvinozvi. Panga pana Mugabe tanga singatombozvizive zvese zvinhu zvakadai.
Zimbabwe in a future, but if we change the current government, we have the future. But if we don't change the current government, we don't have future. Because tinoramba tiri on the same lane. We need to shift from one lane to another. We need to shift from one position to another. Because like the current situation, if we look, those who are poor will remain poor. Those who are rich will remain rich. And your managers will remain, magara mune ability to go on the top and kuvama managers. But you can't go kuvama manager. Why? Because those madara people, they will still want to eat.
According to some of history, atiwanzwa some of vana vadiki zvimwe tatinazviona nemaziso edu ane pakati yambusawo paitigonera. Asi semunhu wanyika ihombe sisi hausina kuzokwanisa kuingogona zvekudaro. Unotofesawo machallenges, zvimwe uchiwina zvimwe uchiruza. Asi on my perspective, I do miss him and I do like him. So.
It was not the right thing kubvisa Mugabe with such demonstration yakaitika. Because unonzwa Nigrin David Arnold Zoni, I'm not going to touch an anointed of the God. And so they were not supposed to be Mugabe nezvakadaro. Why? Because Mugabe vakaiswa pachigaro naMwari.
Vanhu vaiona zviri necessary nekuti vanga vasisade izvozvo. And kana zviri necessary to everyone zvinenge zviri izvo zvinoda vanhu zvine zviri right.
Takangoti zvinhu zvinowanika. Ndanga takurawo takuziva. Tobva tangoziva kuti zvekutonga izvi zvine majano. Saka chachijano chevamwe. Ndo zvatakangofungawo chete.
I don't think it is better, but zviri nani. Pane zvakapedzisira zvakuzviitika pakazobvanzana paMugabe.
Idi or Mugabe. My choice goes to Mugabe. Right, because Mugabe, he was the anointed of God. Mnangagwa, the problem that he does, he acts on a rebellious. So to me, he's a rebellious son. So God doesn't deal with the rebellious. God deals with those who are honest. So you can't go against your father. If you go against your father, you are not doing anything. Hakuna kwa unoenda. So he goes against his father. Why ndichiri Mugabe ndiye baba wake? Because he's the one who mentored him to be a leader, to be what he is today.
Mutava pachachuzike because takuchuza nemunhakafu. Asi dai anga ari mupenyu yatagonongochuza Mugabe.
Things take time. So maybe if you give him time, tinoona kuti see kuti wakamira. Because zvinoitika ka. Vamwe vanoda kurapira. Vari pasi papresident. Zvinoita ndi president futi. Saka zvinoitika zvakawanda. Zvida tinyatsoziva zvekufamba sei. Zvimwe zvacho ukateerera vanhu vanenge vachitozviitira kuda kudonhedza munhu stuff. So many haters.
Ipapo choice yangu yakati both. Nekuti zvatoda isusu sevanhu futi zvimwe hazvikwanisike zvimwe zvokwanisika. Tanombotora kuti nyika chinhu chihombe kutonga saka chinotorema. Ende nezvimwe zvinhu zvinoitika mukati menyika kana corruption vanogona variwo vakuita corruption ichibva kune vamwe variwo, but mhosva yakaenda kunani, inoenda kuna baba, since baba ndo vari kukanganisa, pamwe vasiri vari kukanganisa futi, vachitedza kuti zvinhu zvirese, vachitedza kuti zvinhu zviite.
Totoda kuti zvinhu zvitibhete zvichinji. Everything like izvo zvanotaura ma-street lights, now ma-ghetto youth, most of the ghetto youths vaende kumagrafti akunetsa.
Hapana, ramangwana racho harina kutombomira kudzoka here kana kuti tichikuenda.
Ndati isusu mayuthi mitisu tofanira kutoirwira navo vanadhedhi vacho vakatibatsirawo zvatinoda kurwira, vakatisimbisawo, vakashuvira kuti nyika yedu iende mberi pamwe timukunde.
Zimbabwe in a future, but if we change the current government, we have the future. But if we don't change the current government, we don't have future. Because tinoramba tiri on the same lane. We need to shift from one lane to another. We need to shift from one position to another. Because like the current situation, if we look, those who are poor will remain poor. Those who are rich will remain rich. And your managers will remain, magara mune ability to go on the top and kuvama managers, but you can't go kuvama manager. Why? Because those madara people, they will still want to eat.
Now this was Free Talk, the Frederick Newman Foundation in partnership with Heart and Soul TV and Radio, and I, as always, your host, Dara Blessed Mhlanga. Now we've got to learn from the legacy of those who have led us. President Robert Mugabe led Zimbabwe for the better part of its life, or my life rather, from the day of independence in 1980 up to when he left power on November 17, 2017. And now we are in the dispensation of the leadership of President Emmerson Mnangagwa. Zimbabwe will go to elections in 2023, thereabouts around in September, where we will be electing a new government in all structures: council, parliament, and the presidency. This is the legacy of our nation. We built it together, the history and the understanding, and we reflect on it. People should learn from their history to improve their present. This is why we bring you these conversations on Free Talk with Frederick Newman Foundation, and I, your host, Dara Blessed Mhlanga. Thank you very much for choosing us. Follow us on our pages, on our Facebook page, HStvZim, on our Twitter handle @HSTV News, and on our YouTube channel, HStvZim. Thank you very much. Until next time. This was the Free Talk, proudly brought to you in proud partnership with the Frederick Newman Foundation and Heart and Soul TV and Radio. We believe that dialogue is the crux of development. When people talk to each other, when people listen to each other, development happens. On Free Talk, we believe in political dialogue, economic dialogue, and social dialogue. Everybody must be heard. Everybody has a right to be heard. Free Talk, talking that moves nation. Free Talk, talking that makes a difference. This is the Free Talk.
Johane,